Hi everyone, Dr. Emmy from Pain Free and Fit. Today, a great video for those of you with spondylolisthesis, how to avoid the common problem of pelvic lateral translation with your workouts. Hope you enjoy. So one of the more common workout mistakes that many people with spondylolisthesis make is lateral pelvic translation. It aggravates spondylolisthesis because as the pelvis laterally translates or moves sideways in relation to the torso or the legs, it creates on one side a hip hiking or an elevation of the pelvis, which compresses that side of the disc, the facet joint, creating compressive pain on that side, including the sacroiliac joint. Many people with spondylolisthesis, their pains are aggravated not only with extension or an increased arch in the lower back, but also by asymmetrical forces that repetitively stress the soft tissues in their spine. And compression on one side is a big part of that. Many of the patients I see with spondylolisthesis and work with rehab and getting back into fitness have chronic problems where they feel better after manipulation, better after facet joint injections, even better after surgical procedures until they wind up going back to the same movement habits and asymmetrical repetitive stresses that mechanically aggravate their spondylolisthesis pain. So before you do your next workout, do this simple test to see if you indeed have a pelvic lateral translation issue. It's very simple to stand on one leg and check in a mirror to see if your hip stays in and you stay tall. You can check that from side to side. What you're looking for is, as you stand on one leg, if one side in particular has a tendency for the hip to move sideways. You can feel that by putting your hands on the side of your hips. You can also see that with the body as opposed to a level pelvis. If you put your hands on the top of your hip bones, you'll feel one side greater or higher than another. That means that that side is moving upwards and the rib cage most likely is leaning into that. That's called hip hiking, and it happens with lateral translation. It'll happen when you're doing exercises with one leg in front of another. Exercises such as split squats or lunging movements or box steps when you're stepping up. You'll notice that particular side will have a tendency to swing out and also upwards, compressing that side of the back. It'll happen with your planks. It'll happen with seated and standing chest or shoulder pressing. As you press upwards, you'll notice that the pelvis, as opposed to being centered under your body, will have a slight tendency to move sideways. And your hips will change. You'll feel a little bit more weight on that foot. As it's moving sideways and you're shoulder pressing, or even incline pressing, let's say on a bench, what you'll notice is that the tendency to eke out those last few reps when your exercise is at its greatest effort will indeed require a slight pelvic translation to complete the rep. That's because you're trying to grasp at other motions in the body. You're trying to use momentum from other aspects of your body to create that last repetition success. And in doing so, many times what you're doing is you're literally creating a compressive force, and you're wondering why after your workouts is my lower back bothering me. So a couple of quick tips to help you address this issue is simply learning how to create a level pelvis. And you can do that standing by practicing holding your pelvis to a middle position, but especially on one leg. This is a great exercise called a standing anti-hip hike exercise, where as we stand, we put our hands on our pelvic bones and we practice slumping or allowing that translation to happen. You'll notice that'll happen easier on the side that you usually translate towards, and that side, of course, is usually related to a leg that externally rotates. When you stand, when you walk, when you exercise, you'll notice that foot has a tendency to angle out more than the other side. That's typically the same side where you'll have pelvic lateral translation, indicating a weak gluteus medius muscle, and hip hiking compression in the lower back. So getting back to that standing anti-hip hike exercise, simply practicing standing on one leg and standing with the hip in and level as opposed to swinging upwards, you'll start to feel the glute medius muscle on the side of your hip starting to burn and work. And you can use that for isometric exercises. You can do it for repetitions where you can hold dumbbells in your hand to make it harder, but practicing making a level pelvis with the hip inward so it's centered with your body as opposed to laterally translating and hip hiking will go a long way to strengthening your ability to hold that with exercises such as lunges, such as squats. A lot of people with this problem, as they squat, if you watch them from behind, you'll notice the pelvis translates to the side and they hip hike slightly. Have a friend or a training partner check that out on you. Many cases of spondylolisthesis uncomplicated by pelvic lateral translation. Exercises such as this that are functional in terms of strengthening the glute medius in a standing position are much more effective than other rehab and PT exercises like clamshells, where you're trying to strengthen the glute medius, but it's not in a standing functional way. You want to also practice this in a split squat position, where that side that translates to the side is placed forward. And as you go down, you hold your hips and you practice avoiding that tendency to move sideways, but keep it in line with a level hip so you're not hip hiking. Keep the hip down on that front side. You can again use that for isometric exercises. You can use that for isotonics like split squats. And then eventually you want to work into using that in more dynamic activities where there's more of a plyometric nature, such as stepping up on a box or stair step. If you take a step upwards, you'll notice the lead leg has a tendency to hip hike and laterally translate. So you want to watch that from side to side, and again you'll probably notice the side that the leg usually turns outwards on is the same side that hip hikes and laterally translates with the pelvis. When you practice your box steps or any type of exercise where you're moving the leg upwards, you're going to want to practice holding the hip down and in as opposed to the typical tendency for having it to swing out and upwards. If you like this video on pelvic translation for spondylolisthesis, feel free to subscribe to our channel. We've got a lot of great videos out there to help you. Questions or comments, as always, write in. I'll do my best to answer them. Remember, if you're looking for a great program to self-analyze your body mechanics as it relates to your spondylolisthesis pain and figure out how to build a self-rehab program to address these mechanical issues, get yourself in shape and strengthen your mechanical problems that are creating repetitive stresses to your spondylolisthesis situation, check out our Fast Track program for spondylolisthesis pain, available at painfreeandfit.com. It's a great program that teaches you a self-analysis of your body, figuring out where your posture, your movement issues are, where your spinal stability weaknesses are that are custom for you, that separates you from someone else with spondylolisthesis, and how to systematically build a program to correct those, get you back in shape, and get you working out without hurting your lower back. And of course, if you're having trouble with your analysis or your exercises, I'm always available online for consultations through Zoom. You can contact me through the painfreeandfit.com website. I hope you enjoyed this video on spondylolisthesis and lateral pelvic translation.